Cheers to our last official Mexico Monday.
On this special episode, we'll be recapping 5 months of traveling through Mexico in an RV. If you're new here, I'm Howard.
And I'm Caitlin.
And we're the New State Nomads. It's probably evident we're not in Mexico anymore. We've been in the US for about 2 weeks now.
But we wanted to reflect on the amazing time that we had while we were in Mexico. And it's impossible to boil down all the wonderful experiences, the people we met, the food we ate into one episode.
But we're gonna try.
So what we're gonna do today is list out our top favorite experiences, lessons learned in 5 different categories.
First up, our top 3 excursions or activities.
One of the best was Huastecas and Tamul Waterfall in Ciudad Valle. I think this one holds a special place in both of our hearts because it was one of the first excursions that we had all done as a group together. So not only was it just really exciting, but it was also a team building activity, and the organization that we went with was fantastic. Our guide was awesome.
Lo que se recorre. De esos...
He didn't speak any English, but we could understand a lot of what he was saying. He spoke slowly to us. He was very knowledgeable. Not a lot of American tourists go there. In fact, our guide told us he had not had an American on his tour in over 2 years. So that just kind of gives you an idea about how off the beaten path this is for tourists like us. Mexican tourists go there, and you can see why. It's absolutely breathtaking. You board a canoe and you paddle out to this amazing waterfall in the middle of the jungle. The water is so incredibly teal. You're passing other canoers who are splashing each other. The whole thing was just so much fun. And then the icing on the cake is after you do all that hard work of paddling, you then drive back down the mountain and you get to have a home-cooked meal at someone's house.
La tortilla se dobla.
It was one of the best meals we've had in Mexico.
Number 2 was the monarch butterfly migration. Now this was, for me, I think almost tops on my list anyway for when we were going down to Mexico, and you can clearly see why.
I've never in my life seen anything like this.
Every year, millions, billions of monarch butterflies migrate from the United States and Canada down into just some small, we're talking maybe a few square miles of Mexico. When you get to one of these locations, you can either hike up or take a horse.
How's it feel?
Back in the saddle again, right?
And we chose to ride a horse up, which is kind of funny because we rode a horse and the rest of our group didn't. Once you get up to the top of the hill, it's like there's a line, it's almost like a snow line where no butterflies, suddenly millions of butterflies, and they're everywhere. They're clinging to the trees, to the leaves, to the branches, to each other, and they form like these pods. And when it's in shadow, they're all clustered together, but as soon as the sunlight comes out, they just explode into this, what looks like a cloud of butterflies. One of the most amazing things I think I've ever seen.
And it's such a rare phenomenon. You have to be there at precisely the exact time of the year to be able to see it, and we were lucky enough to get to do that.
Yeah, peak season, from what I understand, is February, March, and that was exactly during the time when we were there.
And rounding out our top 3 excursions or activities we did was paragliding. I'm still processing the fact that I just did that. Something I never, ever, ever thought that I would be able to say I did.
And something I absolutely wanted to do. I just wasn't sure if Caitlin was really gonna do it.
Why do you talk me into these things? I was not gonna do it up until the day before when we actually had to commit to how many people were going, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna practice what I preach and go for it and face my fears. I'm so glad I did. It was one of my favorite things that we did while we were in Mexico.
The team at ProFly was excellent.
You ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1.
Highly experienced. We felt nothing but safe. Valle de Bravo is one of the top locations in the world for paragliding, and the ProFly team clearly is the top at that area.
A very important pin. Your safety reserve pin.
I had one of the crazier guides. We did all kinds of maneuvers and tricks, and it was just awesome.
Meanwhile, I was getting like a nice, relaxing tour over Valle de Bravo as we talked about the scenery.
We had very different experiences. So that's good, because depending on what your comfort level may or may not be, you can have that sort of experience.
Run. Perfect. That was awesome.
Our next category, top 3 misconceptions about Mexico.
And it'll be no surprise that we're gonna hit on safety. I can be the first to admit that I had a lot of reservations about RVing through central Mexico. I was scared based upon things that people had told us and things that you read, and a lot of that is just completely unfounded. In the 5 months that we were there, I don't think either one of us ever felt truly unsafe.
No, and not only that, the police force, which again, people talk about all the time about the corruption and everything, were nothing but helpful. We had 5 separate stops during 5 months, and they were nothing but gracious and would go out of their way to try and help us, including on the very first day that we were there. That's not to say that there aren't areas that you should probably avoid. The US State Department does issue specific warnings, but unfortunately the maps that the State Department releases are entire states. That's completely unrealistic. As an example, imagine if there was a warning about Miami Beach. Well, Miami Beach is a very small area of Miami, which is a very small area of Florida. Imagine if you were avoiding all of Florida, including Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa, just because there was a warning about Miami Beach. Unfortunately, that's the way the maps appear according to the US State Department. You can't avoid an entire state just because of a small area that you probably should avoid.
We would have missed out on some of our all-time favorite places that we went if we had paid attention to those broader warnings. But the reality is that there's not this ongoing war everywhere that you drive in Mexico.
People are happy, friendly, and go out of their way to help you.
And are just so excited that you are there experiencing their culture and their country. Misconception number 2, fuel availability.
I can't tell you the number of times that people were like, you are not going to be able to find diesel, let alone ULSD, which is required for modern diesel engines. The truth is, it's everywhere. The federal government has mandated that there are 13 travel corridors. These travel corridors are probably where you're going to end up going anyway. If you think about it, it's like major routes going in and out of the United States to Mexico City, to the major other cities. You're not going to have a problem finding it. We never had a problem finding it. It was everywhere. And rounding it up, language.
We don't speak Spanish fluently whatsoever.
That should be no surprise if you've watched any of our videos.
Our goal, though, is to become much more fluent and conversational. However, that was definitely not a barrier to enjoying everything that Mexico has to offer. Everybody that we encountered, they were so willing and patient to help you through it and try to understand what you were saying.
Google Translate for the win, all the time.
Yes, and we did brush up and we did get more conversational as time went on and we learned phrases, but that was not a reason to not go to Mexico. I don't want that to inhibit you. If you have a basic understanding of the language, then you're golden. This next category is one of my favorites. Our top 3 destinations or cities that we visited.
In my opinion, number 1 overall was Guanajuato.
Oh,
We loved Guanajuato. It, to me, felt the most authentic and pure.
look at this church.
If you're trying to find a place where a lot of tourists don't go and you want to visit colonial Mexico, go to Guanajuato. It is gorgeous, the food is delicious, the people are friendly. You can't go wrong.
It was the city that I had done the most research on prior to entering Mexico, so I was really excited for it. And I think why it stands out is there's a great company there called GTO Walking Tours, and we got to do one of their tequila tasting tours and a daytime history walking tour. And that was just icing on the cake for the entire visit we had in Guanajuato. The next destination on our list is Mexico City and the area of Teotihuacan.
This was a bit of a surprise. We went there initially because we wanted to see some ruins, and Teotihuacan is a historical town that is built around these ancient ruins, and those were incredible. If you ever get the chance to go, definitely check out the night tour. Caitlin had to miss it, unfortunately, but man, it was so amazing to go through there, and the projection mapping show is unbelievable. When you combine that with Mexico City, which is the 5th largest city in the world, that is such an interesting dynamic, but they're so close to each other that it was possible for us to drive into Mexico City and spend a couple days exploring.
And I am not a city girl whatsoever, so I was a little skeptical, but what I found was that it was very enjoyable, very manageable, not too loud, not too much commotion. I actually enjoyed the city a lot more than I was expecting.
I think it's because of the scale. It doesn't feel like a New York with the long corridors of super tall buildings. Yes, there's downtown, but it is broken into nice neighborhoods that are lower buildings, that it doesn't feel like this big, huge, thriving metropolis. Instead, it's like a collection of small towns and cities.
And not too far outside of Mexico City is an area called Xochimilco, and there are floating gardens there. It's an ancient agricultural method of growing crops, and you can actually go and tour these islands with a company called De La Chinampas. Sweet peas.
Vegetables.
They're so good.
Fruits, flowers. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's really fresh.
The owner of the company, his name is Ricardo, and he's really made it his life's work, passion, and mission to educate people about the chinampas there and sort of the dying art of growing crops in this way.
He's done such an interesting connection too, because he's taking this ancient method of growing and connecting it with some of the top restaurants in Mexico City. And today, several of those restaurants now have their own floating gardens that supply to their restaurants. And rounding it up, and probably a bit of a surprise, San Miguel de Allende.
We only ended up going here because COVID had thrown off our plans in our initial route. We had skipped over San Miguel de Allende to go to Guanajuato. And part of that was because we were afraid it wasn't going to be an authentic Mexican experience like Guanajuato, because it's such a big expat area with so many Americans there.
But the reality was, it was gorgeous.
Margarita and lime dance.
From the food, to the architecture, to the people, San Miguel de Allende was quite the surprise. And we had no problem, by the way, navigating. Again, thanks to the fact that there are so many expats, English is widely spoken there.
So if you're like us and you're a little on the fence about visiting because it might not be as authentic as you had hoped for, I would say throw those fears out the window, definitely go visit. It is worth it. It's beautiful. You'll have a great time.
So let's get a little RV specific now. These are the top 3 places we stayed while in Mexico in the RV.
And our number 1 will come as no surprise if you've been following us. Isla Guada, Freedom Shores Hotel and RV Park, is one of our favorites, hands down. Not only because we spent 3 months there during quarantine and fell in love with Thelma, the owner, but also because it's just absolutely beautiful. And by RV standards in America, it's probably one of the closest you're gonna find outside of those major touristy areas with really big RV parks that are designed for caravans.
And beachfront accommodation for around $11 or $12 a day is a steal. We loved Isla Guada. Granted, it's a small fishing island, so don't expect major attractions, but that's kind of the attraction. It's a laid-back island where people are so friendly. We had grocery and shopping within walking distance, and the beach was right out front our door.
And there are a lot of excursions within driving distance of Isla Guada. We unfortunately did not get to experience any of those because of COVID-19, but just know that it's a great central hub for you to go out and do daytime excursions as well. Our next spot is Valle de Bravo.
This was a surprise just because I knew going into it that a lot of RVers stay there, a lot of the caravans stop there, but I wasn't really expecting much. And boy, what a surprise it was.
Take a look here at our front yard. Absolutely beautiful. Part of why it was such a top spot for me was because it was so serene. Just having those views of the mountains and the lake and the sunrise and sunset and the birds and all the ample grass. Piper and Ella loved the grass. We didn't have Scout yet, but I think she would have loved it too. And you could just sit out there and it was so peaceful and so enjoyable. And it was a short drive into town.
Our last one should be no surprise, Grutas Tolantongo.
This was an adventure in and of itself just to get down to the campsite. So if you're a rig that is bigger than us, 30 feet or more, I highly recommend you not drive down in your rig.
This is an incredibly popular spot for people from Mexico City to travel into on the weekends, and they almost all come by bus. The buses stop at the very top, and if you are longer than 30 feet, you can stay up there and dry camp and then take the shuttle buses like all of the other people do down into Grutas de Tolantongo.
Part of what made it such an epic spot for us to camp was because of the warm Teal River that you got to camp right beside. We had a fire and you just wake up to these incredible views. And hot tip, try to go on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you will have the place to yourself. And because you're camping there, you'll get to go to all the attractions as soon as you wake up and as soon as they open.
From the grottos to the cliffside infinity pools, there's tons of water activities to explore.
And ziplining if you feel adventurous.
Grutas Tolantongo, for me, is a must visit. If you're going to come to Mexico, specifically in the central region, check it out.
We backtracked from our route to be able to go, and it was definitely worth it. And the next category is lessons learned. We learned way too much to be able to fit into this video, so here are our top 3.
First up is do not trust Google Maps.
Because you'll end up in situations like us.
Our very first day in Mexico, Google recommended that we try and get the RV to go through a hobbit hole.
It's That's really what it was. And that should have been lesson enough right there, but we kept listening to Google Maps because it happened when we were trying to leave Ida Bravo.
Took a 90-minute detour to get right back to where we were.
And it was taking us down a road, and luckily Howard caught the sign before we drove under it that there was a tunnel that we would not fit under. Don't trust Google Maps. Pay attention to the signs. Another lesson that we had to learn the hard way and pretty quickly was cash is king in Mexico. We should have had a lot more Mexican money when we crossed the border. Howard took out pesos yesterday, but it was definitely not enough for our trip down.
Tolls are very expensive here. Our first stop was over $30 per RV. Cards are rarely taken except at really fine dining restaurants and some shops and supermarkets. But tolls, forget it. It's all cash. When we entered Mexico, luckily the day before I had stopped and exchanged some money because I was concerned about where the first ATM was going to be, and I knew that the tolls were cash only. We quickly ran out of cash because the rest of the amigos didn't have enough. So plan on frequent refilling trips to ATMs in order to have cash on hand. Two banks in particular that have very inexpensive ATM fees are Citibanamex and Banorte. When you see either of those two ATMs, even if you don't think you need money, you need money.
And that connects us into number one, don't trust Google Maps, because the first day when we did not have enough cash, we got into a bit of a pickle because we were driving around trying to find an ATM to withdraw more cash to continue on, so we had it for the tolls. And that led us astray into small cities that we probably shouldn't have been driving RVs in, trying to find an ATM.
So if you're searching on Google Maps looking for an ATM, you're not going to find them. Instead, search for Citibanamex or Banorte, and that will take you to an ATM. The last lesson is really an affirmation. It really is that cheap in Mexico.
Avocados, limes, peppers, onion, apple, huge pineapple for $5. The avocados alone in the US would have been $5. Our overall bill total was
$57?
$57, so that's 1,078 pesos. In the States, that would have been a lot more money. Food, camping, accommodations, excursions, everything is incredibly cheap.
Except for gas and tolls. Gas, specifically diesel, runs sometimes 50%, even 100% more than what it costs in the United States. So don't be surprised when you pull up to the pump and they pump the gas for you, by the way, there. So travel days can actually be quite expensive, but all the other days, really cheap. But the truth of the matter is, our cost of living for the 5 months that we were there was dramatically lower than even, I would say, 1 or 2 months here in the United States. We saved money by living in Mexico for 5 months. I would go back in a heartbeat, because if you're looking for that inexpensive RV experience, Mexico is where it's at. That is so much crab. The total cost of this was 180 pesos, right? That's like $8 right now with the exchange rate. You could dine out every single day for lunch and dinner, and it still will be less expensive than groceries in the United States. And the food, don't get me started on that. I know that was not a topic here, but you guys know, if you've watched our videos, how absolutely incredible the food is. This might be one of the best burritos I've ever had. And 3 lessons is definitely not enough. So if you have any more questions, please drop them in the comments below.
We originally started documenting our travels through Mexico because we know it has a bad reputation, and if we could change just one person's mind, then it was totally worth it for us. Look for a video this week in the community tab where we share the results of the poll where we asked you your opinions on Mexico after watching our travel series.
And for more information on how we can all together help support the communities that we explore, visit our brand new Patreon page at patreon.com/newstatenomads.
Next week, we resume our travels here in the States through Texas and beyond.
Be sure to subscribe and remember to click the bell so you receive notifications when we post our new videos every single week.
Thanks for watching.